right. Good evening and welcome. Well, that's loud. We are being streamed this evening, and it will be up on YouTube for future reference. My name is Brian Blake, the Superintendent of Schools here, and this is Officer Joe Perna, our SRO, and a member of the Ipswich Police Department. I want to thank everyone in attendance this evening, or who are watching from home. Tonight, we want to provide an overview of our school system in terms of safety and security. I want to begin by acknowledging that the safety of our students, your children, and staff is our number one priority. I also want to acknowledge that this topic can be difficult to talk about. We all have our own histories, experiences, and fears about violent acts taking place in our schools. One parent sent in a question that I believe captures what we're all feeling and need. He asked, given my background as a school psychologist and experience as a superintendent, what are some concrete strategies that I can recommend to parents so that we can live with less anxiety in an uncertain world that will never be completely safe? Gun violence in both schools and communities across the country have become recurring headlines in the media, heightening our fears and bringing concerns over our own district's safety plans and responses to the forefront. The reality is that there are about 125,000 schools in the country and about 21 deaths per year in schools. That's about 1 in every 6,000 schools that has a violent act resulting in death each year. These statistics are based on FBI statistics, and in that, they indicate that schools are actually one of the safest places for our children to be. Far safer than in restaurants, stores, in the street, or even in their own homes. Nonetheless, I recognize that the fear and anxiety of a school shooting or violence taking place in any of our schools exists. I've been around long enough to have been working as a superintendent when many of these acts have occurred, some of the biggest ones. Tonight, with the help of our school resource officer, Joe Perna, we hope to allay some of those concerns by sharing information about what we as a district are doing to keep our students and staff safe and secure. The district's approach to safety and security, as you will see throughout this presentation, balances addressing the social and emotional well-being of each student and fostering a sense of belonging with a proactive approach to training, preparedness, and emergency operational planning. While we're confident in our current security and safety plans, we also recognize that there's always advances in security measures that can be considered, and we continually have to reevaluate our plans and measures. The safety and security measures that will be discussed tonight will continue to be evaluated and approved upon to ensure that your children and the staff in these buildings are safe. Tonight, we want to cover the following topic areas. Creating a culture of care. What do we have going on in our buildings to support our students and maintain positive relationships? And why is that important? Emergency operations planning. What are the emergency plans and where do they come from? Physical plant security. What do we have in place at our schools to keep us safe, both externally and internally? And best practice drills in professional development. What and how do we practice keeping our kids and staff safe? And finally, I'll answer some of the questions that were sent in ahead of time. As I indicated in my messaging, there'll be moderated questions at the end of the evening. I have the questions here. Most of them I was able to work into the presentation this evening, but ones that weren't, I'll go back and make sure that we try to answer them as we go through. Excuse me 1 minute. That's never happened before. So creating a culture of care. In Ipswich, we focus on supporting the whole child. We often hear in the wake of school shootings or acts of violence, those inflicting the violence may have lacked a sense of belonging or a positive relationship with a trusted adult or peers. We know that nationally, and right here in Ipswich, there's an increased concern for the mental health of our students. We take that very seriously in Ipswich and have programs and supports in place to address the social and emotional needs of our students. In addition to our counselors and psychologists, we have Responsive Classroom and Think Social that are just two opportunities for our students at the elementary level to learn pro-social behavior and establish positive relationships with teachers and peers. The Transition and Growth Health Curriculum is taught at the middle school by the health teacher and school counselors in the 6th grade so that every student has an introduction in a positive way to the school counseling staff. We have an active advisory program at the high school so that every student has an adult they interact with on a regular basis in small groups. Every school has a version of the multi-tiered system of supports, or MTSS, where teams meet regularly to discuss students that may be struggling with social or emotional issues. The team can gather data and make recommendations to support students in the classroom. We have a district-wide diversity, equity, and inclusion team that's dedicated to amplifying marginal voices. The group celebrates the diversity within and beyond our community while confronting issues of equity and inclusion in our practices and our learning environments. We have a part-time family liaison position that works with our most needy families, helping to secure resources and provide supports. And finally, we use restorative justice circles at the middle and high school to provide a safe place for students to work through issues with their peers in a supportive environment. This is just a sampling of the many ways we connect with our students, build positive relationships, and maintain safe learning environments. Now I'd like to turn it over to Officer Perna to talk about our emergency operations plans.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Blake. Good evening, everybody. I'm Detective Joe Perna with the Ipswich Police. I'm the juvenile detective as well as your school resource officer. So the best way that I can describe my job is the same way I would describe it to your kids, which is pretty much if your kids are in school, I'm in school. So I'm a full-time Ipswich police officer who is assigned and dedicated to the schools when the schools are in session. And a little bit of introduction to what the school resource officer job is. It's really a three-prong approach where we are a law enforcement officer, kind of like a quasi counselor, and then also do our best to work as an educator. So luckily, I am able to spend the majority of my time doing the pieces where I'm interacting with your kids and the students, and don't have to focus so much on being the law enforcement piece of it. So I am in my 8th year as your school resource officer. I was a patrol officer for 9 years before that here in Ipswich. I went, born and raised here, graduate of Ipswich High School. So when I got into law enforcement, this was the job that I always wanted, and luckily when a spot opened up, I was able to get it. So, I usually tell people don't tell anybody, but it's the best job in law enforcement. I try to keep it a secret. But so this past year, over the summer, we took a look at some of the emergency planning that we had. There were binders that had existed in the classrooms but needed to be refreshed. So we did that. We pulled emergency plans together and updated those binders. So we did that not just by creating them on our own, but we're lucky enough in our area we have what's called NEMLEC and NEMLEC STARS. So NEMLEC is the Northeastern Massachusetts Law Enforcement Council. It's a consortium of police departments and 2 sheriff's departments pretty much in Essex and Middlesex County that pretty much come together to pool resources and personnel. And then the STARS unit is the School Threat Assessment Response System, which I am also a part of myself. So the NEMLEC STARS is one of its founding principles, dedicated itself to creating solid crisis and emergency planning and other resources for schools and for communities. So we went to what they have is the NEMLEC STARS Toolkit, and we have that. Actually, everybody pretty much has access to it because it's a website, and pulled plans from their school emergency operations plans and pulled those into what we thought would be the most relevant ones that we needed for our binders, and pulled that all together. The binders also include so the binders also include for as a resource to staff and teachers detailed maps of each building and classroom. So a concrete numbering system for the classrooms, and then also numbering and lettering system for the doors. All of this stuff is also, we also have it available to us as law enforcement, public safety, so police and fire also have access to this information. We've included in there instructions on how to use the intercom system. So, if there was an emergency, that teachers and staff know immediately how to get on the intercom system and broadcast something immediately. The classroom and building extension list, all the phone numbers that somebody might need in the building. Rally point information, including pictures and maps to each location. I'll touch on rally points later. And specific protocols for various emergency situations that would commonly arise or we think we would need immediate access to for a plan. So here's just a quick glimpse of what those plans look like for our binders. And if I was going to highlight one, say something like a bomb threat. So the plan specifically lists out what people's roles and responsibilities are, what the purpose of the plan is, and then say even something as big as this, if we had a bomb threat, it breaks down and gives us guidelines on what would be a low, medium, and high-risk threat. All right? And so they took all this information from state police and then also the FBI, who frequently puts out these guidelines, refreshes them, and distributes them to us. I think that's it on that part.
So these binders are in each and every classroom and most of the ancillary offices and all of the main offices throughout the district. So let's talk a little bit about our physical plant security. Currently, we have buzzers and cameras on all of the front doors. Visitors should be going only to the front door to be let in. Upon ringing the buzzer, the office staff will be asking you to identify yourself and what you're there for. Staff members are using a very similar script, may not be the exact words, but the similar script in all 4 buildings. Upon being allowed entry into the building, visitors are to report to the office and sign in. Entry to the building is at the discretion of the school personnel who are answering the buzzer. Volunteers, chaperones, student teachers, etc., all must have a CORI on file. Anyone that we expect to have direct contact with our students must also have fingerprints on file. Many of the other doors also have a badging system for the staff to be able to enter the building without a key. It's a key card system that we have. We're continuing to evaluate and add keypads in different areas of the different buildings based on the staffing need and the usage. The badging system records the timestamp and the staff member when the badge is used, so we have a record of who's entering the building, particularly after hours when the building is locked up. We have an extensive interior and exterior camera system at the high school that we've added on to over the years. We also have additional cameras on order for both the elementary schools to enhance their systems. These cameras, and this is one of the questions that came up, these cameras can and are available to the police department in the dispatch area, as well as in the offices in the schools, and any responding officers can access them as well. So there is ample access to our internal and external cameras. We will be installing a camera and entry system at the central office. It's not something that we've had in the past. We also routinely have police officers as part of their daily routine during school drop-off and dismissal at all 4 schools. You'll see them out across the street here. You'll see them out in front of the Paul F. Doyle Memorial School as well as Winthrop, and you'll see usually one stationed out back here as well. Many of the officers in town have children in our system, so they're in and out of our schools fairly regularly. You can see them around. The Ipswich Public Schools, in conjunction with the Ipswich Police Department and the Ipswich Fire Department, utilizes what we call Be Safe technology. It's an online system that's available to all first responders, and Joe mentioned it just a few minutes ago. And it allows first responders to access critical information from any of their vehicles. So this is an example of the Paul F. Doyle Memorial School and the information that any responding, either the fire department or police department, sheriff's department, anybody responding to the building would have access to. So it's critical information, phone numbers, contact information, types of the fire alarm, shows where the Knox boxes are, what kind of building systems we have in place as far as heat, gas shutoff, water shutoff. It has aerial maps of the buildings, has the floor plan of each building, and it shows pictures of each side of the building so that folks pulling up to the buildings know exactly what they're looking for and at. And so we have that for each of the 4 buildings. And then we have interior pictures as well that show some of the main panels and where gas and water shutoffs are as well. In terms of internal physical plant security, all staff members are required to wear their ID badges on their person so that they can be easily identified. Each school in the central office also have a direct connect radio with the police dispatch, and those are all in the main offices. In addition, we have internal walkie-talkie systems that reach throughout the schools for folks to use. There are intercom systems, as Joe mentioned, in each building that allow announcements to be made school-wide. We're looking at additional speakers in some areas outside the building for when students are out of doors. Right now, the communication system is those handheld walkie-talkies. School doors. We've heard a lot about school doors in the last couple of months. The doors vary by design, interior and exterior. We've had some doors replaced recently at the Winthrop School in particular because the locking mechanisms no longer worked given their age. In most cases, the internal doors are capable of locking from the inside of the classroom. At the Paul F. Doyon School, the doors are keyed only from the one side, so they have to actually physically lock them from the outside. So we're looking at how we can rekey them, maybe change the handles or change the backing on them so that they'll be able to be locked from the inside. We're also looking at a shorter term solution. There's a magnetic strip that goes over the door locker, the hole in the side, in the, what's the word I'm looking for? The catch plate, so that the doors can remain locked, but that if there's an emergency, you just pull that out and the doors will close and be locked. But you'll be able to, if the plate is in, you'll be able to access the door. So that'll be a short-term solution that we're looking at. Most of the doors in the district also have a wedge attached to the back. There's a panel that's built on the bottom of the door that there's a wedge that we've actually we've made here in the district. They're made out of wood, but they're a good immediate security piece that people can wedge the door closed. So most of the doors in the district, I believe, have those as well. Doors with curtains, doors with windows in them, although most of our doors are solid. A lot of them, in particular at the middle school, have windows in them, so we have curtains for those. So there's a number of things that and the doors aren't perfect by any stretch. I realize that, and we've heard a lot recently, as I said, about our interior doors. Some of them are swelling because of the humidity, so we've got to shave those doors down and make sure they fit properly, as well as the locking mechanisms and getting that squared away. So those are projects that we'll be tackling in the next couple of months here before the next school year starts. Now I'd like to turn it back over to Joe Perna to talk about our practice drills and professional development.
So I've been tasked in the district to relay all the information that we talked about in regards to emergency plans and procedures to staff and students. Especially in regards to the student piece, there was a lot of apprehension, before we started doing this, but we realized that this is the best way that we can prepare them for an emergency is if we give them the information. But I think it's important for you to know as parents kind of like how we deliver that message, right? So, I give the presentation on all the procedures, which basically, sum up like evacuations, which is, fire drills or some other evacuation, bus evacuations, shelter in place, which is where we essentially, shut the classroom doors and everybody stays in place. We keep the hallways clear. A perimeter lock-in, which is essentially like we pull everybody inside if we have to, and we don't let anybody into the building. And then we get into Alice, which is the most, kind of critical one and important, but also, at times, anxiety-causing one to talk about. But we talk about it, and we have these discussions so that the kids know kind of like what the expectations are. So to start from, so I do these presentations with the kids and the teachers starting from kindergarten up. So, and we talk about all of the procedures pretty much, but obviously as we go up in age, we add a little bit and, try to be as age appropriate as we can. So just to cover it, ALICE stands for Alert, Lockdown, Inform, Counter, and Evacuate. So when I talk to the elementary kids about emergencies, we talk about what an emergency is, right? We try to clarify what that is, but I also try to clarify with them that we're not just talking about it because it's a school thing, that an emergency can happen anywhere. So, when we do these presentations, or if the kids are talking about it, I encourage you as parents to kind of continue that dialogue, because we talk about how an emergency can happen at home, can happen at the park, can happen at the movie theater, can happen at a restaurant. And some of the things that we're talking about, or a lot of the things that we're talking about, apply to those emergencies outside of school as well. Even as much as calling 911 if they had to, because there wasn't an adult able to call at that point, or present or able to call. But really the mantra that I use with the kids at the elementary school level, even though we talk about all the different things and all the different procedures that we do, that their real job is just to stop, look, and listen. So there's an indication that there's an emergency, they stop, they look at the teacher or the adult that they're with, and then they listen for the instructions. And by the time we're done having that conversation about the procedures, they kind of get that. We repeat it over and over again. So that's the foundation that we're laying with the younger students, and then we build on it as we go up. Not until we get into 4th and 5th grade do we cover the counter piece of Alice. So when we do, I'll just elaborate a little bit more on each piece of Alice. Alice, the alert part just means essentially like being aware of your surroundings, and then also a big piece of it is see something, say something, right? So we encourage them, right? If they see something out of the ordinary, they see something dangerous. And again, I'll touch on this, it doesn't have to be in school, or it doesn't just have to be an emergency. It could be like a bullying situation. If you see something that's not right, say something about it. The lockdown piece, we touch on it more in our plans as more of like the enhanced lockdown, which is pretty much barricading at that point. We're not able to evacuate, which is the preferred, obviously, response, to evacuate and go to safety. So we talk about barricading and piling stuff up against the door to make it as close to impossible to get in. And also like touching on those door wedges that each door has. The inform piece being to relay as much information as you can, and notifying as many people as you can, and kind of like what that looks like. Again, a piece of that goes to see something, say something as well. Letting people know that there's something that's not right. I'll skip over to evacuate. Evacuate again being the optimum response to get to somewhere safe if you can. And then, like I said, we touch on the counter piece, which is doing whatever you have to do to protect yourself, anywhere from distraction to using something that's in close proximity to protect yourself. So we add that counter piece. We don't talk to the kindergartners, first graders, second graders, third graders, but when they get into 4th and 5th grade, we add the counter piece there. And then obviously the kids think it's super weird. They're like laugh a little bit, like this is something that we can do, and we just kind of be like, again, you're going to stop, look, and listen to the adult in the room. But yes, if this is something that the adult says we need to do at that point, this is what we do. When we get to the middle school, we continue to build on it. Once we get to the middle school, high school level, we'll show an Alice video that's already prepared, and kind of give them a better visual sense of what the Alice procedures look like, and then we talk more about it. So we talk about the emergency procedures, and then we build on it. And then we also start working more on barricading practice. So that's essentially like a drill for us. Like we talked about our emergency procedures, we talked about enhanced lockdown, we talked about barricading, and now we're going to practice it. And the teachers go in the classrooms and they practice barricading with the students. And then we talk a little bit more about the counter piece because it's more age appropriate, and then even into the high school level where Alice teaches if you need to do whatever you can to stop somebody who's an active threat and trying to hurt people, you can do the swarm technique. So those are the type of things that we cover in our trainings. When I talk to the staff, So the staff actually initially views a prepared Alice training video. So, in my mind, it's, the people who own Alice and produce Alice produce a pretty good product in regards to a training video, but we don't just stop with that. Then we, pull everybody together for the emergency procedure presentation, and then have a discussion about what is in that training video, so we can build on it. And in the past, we've also done tabletop exercises where we give scenarios, and like if this happens, what would your response be? And we go through that, and we debrief, and we talk about it. And then obviously we do drills for, say, like a violent intruder or an active threat, and run through those. We have the Ipswich Police Department, the Ipswich Fire Department, whoever, if they're available, come assist with it, observe, and then all of us as a collective whole kind of make observations and then debrief and see what kind of modifications to our plans can we make for that. Excuse me. Coughing just like you. So the violent intruder drills we've only done at the middle school, high school level. So at this building, right, combined building. So we've done them here. We have not done them at the lower level, but we've done like a shelter-in-place drill. So essentially, still doing a drill where we get on the PA, make an announcement that we're doing a drill, and kind of give them that run-through of this is the kind of stimulus that we'll get in emergency, maybe a PA announcement or somebody yelling that we have an emergency, and then we're going to react to it by following the teacher's instructions. So, that's something that we are talking about planning increased frequency to for the drills at all levels. I think that's introductions. So, in any kind of emergency that we get, like Dr. Blake talked about, whether it be a 911 call, radio communication from the office radios that we have for the police radios, all of us are trained as police officers, even the firefighters. So firefighters and the police officers in town have been giving the same presentations I talked about, our emergency procedures. I've also given to our police officers and firefighters so that they kind of know what our protocols are as well, so that when they arrive, they kind of know what to look for, right? And so obviously the response is as quick as it can be, and then we follow our procedures that we're supposed to follow as police officers and first responders responding to an emergency.
Just a couple of other protocols and things that we have in place. Along with that, the fire department does a walkthrough every summer of our buildings. They'll usually bring in an entire shift in, walk through the buildings and just visually see where things are in the building so that they have a better sense of the layouts of our buildings. We also have the online reporting system that's right on the main page of our school district website, so that people can anonymously or not anonymously report incidents that need to have somebody pay attention to. Those come right to me, and then I respond accordingly, whether it's to the police or back to that person if they left me information to follow up. The form has not been used extensively, but the few times that it has been used, we've been able to work through a couple of different issues, whether it was a bullying and harassment incident or some racist graffiti that was chalked in one of the parking lots, things like that. So we've been able to deal with issues, and so I think to that extent the form works. We do have sex offender registry, and the photos are available in each of the buildings. We have the Corian fingerprinting system that is fairly extensive, and just so folks are aware, quarries are good for 3 years. And so even if you've been quarried in the past, if the 3-year period comes up and it expires, when you come to a building and we check that quarry, it may not be active. So keep that in mind if it's been a 3-year period. So we keep a spreadsheet of all the quarries, okay? So you may come to a building and we find that your quarry is out of date. You'll have to come back to fill out the form again and get it done. Now, that being said, the quarry system, sometimes it works very quickly. It's a 10-minute turnaround, and other times it takes hours. So you really can't wait till the day of an event to come and get a quarry if you need a new one. So that's for anybody, because it could take hours to get that. One of the things that Joe hadn't mentioned was internally we have what we call CSTAG training, which is Comprehensive School Threat Assessment Guidelines. And so all of the administrators over the last 2 months, I think, have completed level 1. And actually from noon to 4 tomorrow, we're working together to complete level 2. So that all of the administrators, school counselors, school psychologists will be certified to do threat assessments in our schools. We also debrief after any of our any events. We had the swatting incident a few months back that brought to light something as simple as in the cafeteria we couldn't hear announcements. Well, we needed to turn up the volume on the system in there and get a microphone so that announcements could be made and everybody could hear clearer. So every time there's a drill, an incident, we reassess our plans and take a look, what worked, what didn't, were there problems, and every situation is different. So every time something different can come up. So our next steps. At this point, we have an additional SRO that's been hired for the rest of the school year. Sergeant Dan Kamek has joined us for the remainder of the year. So between he and Joe, they'll be between all 4 schools. They rotate through, so nobody is in one place versus another, as well as the police officers that I indicated earlier would be around the buildings. As I mentioned earlier this evening, we have additional cameras that have already been ordered. A lot of these things, it's interesting. It's been in our capital plan, and so we have the cameras have already been ordered to be installed at both elementary schools. There's also money in the capital plan for rekeying many of the doors in the district, in particular the elementary schools. Was it last summer, John, we did this building, or 2 years ago? 2 years ago, we did this entire building. And we're currently looking for an external company to conduct another external audit. I know that was one of the questions that was posed. The year that I got here, so 6 years ago now, Pam Perini was Perini Associates, I think was the name of the company. She had done a pretty extensive security audit of our system, and that's where a lot of the initial cameras and security measures came from. And so it's time to revisit that. I think we've completed all of the items that were on her punch list, if you will, over the years. Joe and I had talked about a district-wide safety committee last year. That suggestion came back up. Haley Rist from Paul F. Doyen's school suggested it, and I think it's a great idea. So we'll be looking to organize that over the summer and get that rolling. And then I'll be working with the administrative team to schedule not only the ALICE training and get that done early in the year, right out of the gate, but also all of the drills and practice for each building. I think, in light of recent events, we need to do all of that sooner. And as Joe pointed out, historically, we haven't done extensive drills at the elementary level, and I think we need to start looking at that a little bit differently and doing more with that. And then finally, there's been a lot of feedback from the community over the last month. And so we're continuing to take a look at that. There's lots of ideas, there's lots of programs out there, there's a lot of different apps, phone apps that we can look at to use. And there's no shortage of school security companies that are looking to sell you everything from metal detectors and different identification systems and things like that. So we really need to look at what's going to best meet our needs as a district and a system, so that we're doing what's right for us as a district, not particularly what's required in necessarily in a big city, for example, that has a lot of violent crime. So at this point, I'm going to I have the moderated questions, so I just want to spend some time with some of those. I tried to work in, these are all the questions that we received over the last couple of weeks since I put this invitation out. And I think many of the questions we've worked into this presentation. There were a lot of questions about Alice, a lot of questions about drills. There's a number of questions here about the infrastructure, building vestibules, bulletproof glass, things like that. And that goes back to my earlier comment about trying to figure out as a school district what's best for us. And so those are all things that we'll be considering as we move forward. And, there's also the hope, the anticipation that these changes that we make to our systems, while important and necessary, we hope that they're temporary, in that we'll be in a new building at some point in the next 6 or 7 years, so that we would have the school security and safety measures that are all up to date and one system, instead of trying to go back and correct things in old buildings. So So what are we doing to make sure that safety procedures are followed? In my experience when visiting schools, safety procedures have not been followed. When I've needed to come in during the day, I've been prompted to sign in, show identification, or even state my name, and been allowed into the building unescorted. So, I think that's a great question, and I think that we've had to we have to tighten up our security door entry procedures. As I mentioned in my presentation, the secretaries are now using a common script to talk to people. In most cases, it's all parents that we know, but there are other people that come to visit our schools as well, and they need an appointment, or we need to know why they're there and who they're there to see. And it's just it's a simple reminder. It's on our daily notices going out to the staff every day now. I think a lot of it hopefully is going out into your weekly messages. We've been polite. If somebody's coming in behind me, I hold the door for them, right? Instead of them getting buzzed in. And I think we all are guilty of that. And so we really need to make sure that we're helping out with the schools as well in terms of not letting other people in and having them go in individually. How does the Ipswich school system compare with other cities and towns in Mass with regard to safety procedures at school buildings? Very similar. We have many of the districts in the area use the NEMLEC STARS program. There's also a number of other ones that are out there that that have been developed, mostly all by national organizations that have been researched. There's another one that we were going to be taking a look at. It's called School Security Best Practices that's just being put out by the Massachusetts Chiefs of Police Association. It just came out this year. Again, a research-based system that we're going to look to see how we can incorporate that into our system. ALICE training in particular is one type of training. There are other programs out there. Crisis Go is another system that I'm aware of. And then there's I Love You Guys, I think is the name of another program that they're using over in Triton. So there are other systems that if we were unhappy with the ALICE training, we could look to change that. But obviously, all districts throughout the Commonwealth have programs in place. How will substitute teachers and staff be trained in emergency procedures? In the substitute teacher manual that we have, there is information in that manual for substitute teachers, as well as in the subfolder. There's a one-pager that the subs get and are aware of when they come in to work in our system. Oh, this is a different one. How helpful is it for parents to call the school and the police and show up to take their children away from the school when there's an active incident going on? And the person who was responding said, obvious it's not, but I think parents need to understand that panic doesn't aid anything. I do, however, think them knowing there's an incident going on as soon as possible is going to help. You know, social media and the newspaper being instantaneous these days kills us in terms of being able to deal with an incident and appropriately contact parents, because we've got students and sometimes staff members texting outside, and so everybody out on the outside knows a lot more than what's going on than people in the building. And so the social media is just it's probably our worst enemy as administrators in trying to deal with situations. I understand from the swatting incident that a lot of parents were calling and clogging the lines at the police department. And so just for folks to be aware of what they're doing and allowing the police and school to deal with the incident and then respond accordingly, I think is important for folks to know and understand. Has the district conducted, I talked about this already, has the district conducted an outside threat vulnerability assessment? We're looking for a company to redo that. There are lots of models out there for conducting our own internally, but I know that the request has been made that we do an external one, which I'm fine with, and we'll be able to support that. There's a number of things in here, number of questions in here asking about currently or future plans to have permanent police or security guards in each of the buildings permanently. And at this point, there's not. There's not. We have the SRO district-wide. We have a second SRO on staff now until the end of the year, and then we'll be reassessing that over the summer to see what the need is there and what the position would entail if in fact we did go in that direction. How can we protect the children while they're playing on the playground? Doyon's playground is not fenced off and anyone can easily walk around the property. That's true of all of our buildings. We have, I came into town today, and right out here There were classes out on the front lawn. We have kids out for recess, lunch, PE classes in back. We have students out on the front and back lawns of both elementary schools. We can, and I'm not sure exactly what else we could do. Do we fence that in, and what does that gain us if we fenced it in? How secure do we want things to be, yet maintaining some sense of normalcy, right? Is the district exploring all available options for obtaining additional funds or grant money to improve school safety? Yes. The answer to that is a definitive yes. I met with Jonathan Hubbard last Thursday, I think it was, to talk about a federal grant that he's writing for some additional communication opportunities for us, higher-end radios for all of the schools and radio repeaters, if you will, that will get us the bandwidth and the distance that we would need between the district. We've also talked about installing panic buttons in the schools, but again, that requires radio boxes for each building at a significant cost. So we're looking at that as part of a grant opportunity as well. Can we get Fry's to pay for specific door stoppers specific to school intruders or shooters, since the doors don't lock? The doors lock. We have some swollen doors that don't shut all the way, but they all have the capability of being locked. I would suggest that we talk as a district and collectively sort out what it is that we need or want for school security and additional security measures, and do it as a district rather than asking the Fry's groups or PTOs to do any of that work for us. How will you ensure that you've answered teachers' questions and concerns about school safety? The school safety conversations have been ongoing in the buildings. I know that the elementary schools have had numerous faculty meetings about it. I know that it's been a regular agenda topic for the Winthrop School. I know that John at the high school has dedicated staff meeting time to those. And certainly the online options that folks have to ask questions are available to them. They can either speak directly with their administrator or send me an email. There's also a direct connect form that I sent out earlier to the staff members if they wanted to share anything with me directly, whether it be events in their classrooms or suggestions, and I have gotten a few of those. So there are options available. One of the things that we can do is to send out a survey here at the end of the year, since this is in the forefront of everybody's mind, just to see what their thoughts are moving forward in terms of what they feel that they need, and then talk about what we can provide with, based on that. Okay, I think I've hit on all of the questions that I'm able to answer tonight. And then there was one other question, recurring theme, just in terms of increased communication with parents about school safety. And we can certainly explore that and see, I don't know what that would look like, in terms of a weekly or a monthly update about security measures. I'm not, the question wasn't clear. It just said that, can we communicate more about safety measures? So I have to give that some thought, and maybe if the person who sent that in wants to follow up with me, I'd be glad to have a conversation about it and see how we can increase communication. Certainly this, as I said at the outset this evening, not easy stuff to talk about, and times are uncertain. You send your precious kids to us every single day, and it's our responsibility to maintain their safety. I take that very serious. I've been at this a long time, and that's the last thing that any of us want to have happen is for something to happen in our schools. Period. So with that, that concludes. So that concludes my presentation for tonight. I would like to thank everybody who submitted the questions ahead of time. As I said, I answered as many of them during the presentation as I could. If you have lingering questions that you want to get back to me on, I'd be glad to talk more about it offline this evening or tomorrow. Your feedback is valuable. It's critical to what we do. And we're going to continue to review those suggestions and see how we can continue to improve the safety of our kids without necessarily turning it into a bank vault for everybody, right? Because we want kids to feel welcome and safe in our schools. So with that, I thank you and good night. Good night, Ipswich.